live thing. But actually, no, it just did. Never mind. That time it did.
It just is random, I guess.
Yeah, that's what it is. Fine.
I guess I'm not using the mug today. Oh, well.
Did you forget your mug?
Mhm.
Oh.
I'm not using my old one from last night with fucking old beer in it. That's for sure.
You can wash them out,
Well, I can't get up now and go get a mug.
No, I know. I hear you.
We're live.
No, actually, it's not fine this time. I don't quite get these things sometimes. But in any case, yeah, we're a little bit late, and we'll be jumping up a little bit early. So that's the scoop with this. So that's the plan. So anyway, yeah, we'll see how it goes. At least it's gonna be a nice long weekend here. Weather's gonna be actually pretty cool. So that's pretty nice. That time it doesn't fit right. So yeah. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. It'll be fun to hang out this afternoon. That'll be a good time.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
To make a quick exit out of here when this thing's done.
Yeah.
So maybe try to get done like around 20 on something like that.
11:30 should be fine. That gives us enough time. I'm just trying to bring the comments up on this thing because the stupid thing won't show me.
There are no comments. I remember the first time we did this, and you said, if you're out there and if you're listening.
And then Jay Price was out there.
Yeah, she was the first one. So yeah, so that's okay. It's just us right now. So that's cool.
Okay, live chat. Here we go.
Yeah.
Yep, there are there's 3 people on here.
Oh,
okay. That says for the numbers.
Oh, yeah, that's all good. It is all good. Yeah, we'll get our bearings together here. A couple minutes late. Technical difficulties as usual. It's a stupid thing. I guess what can you expect from Zoom? Or actually, I think it's my little headset.
I think it's probably your headset. I think you probably need a new one.
I think it's the adapter, but it's all good. It doesn't matter. So yeah.
Well, I think you pay attention to the technological guru of this, which is me.
Yeah. No, it's
good morning, Barbara. Barbara was on our roundtable the other night, which we had a great discussion on there.
Those roundtables are cool because people can kind of get together, and it's funny when we always seem to get the same messages later. People always say they enjoy it because they get to talk of this stuff. There's no one in their lives who they can talk about this, stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. So people do that because I mean, whether it's even if it's just you and me, we'd have fun doing it. The fact that other people jump on is actually really, really neat.
No, it was a great discussion. It was lots of oh yeah, Barbara, I think the live notification, it's really weird on YouTube. Like you have to choose to get notified, but then even it doesn't always send it out. It's YouTube's thing. Good morning, Paul. But yeah, I thought it was a great discussion because we were talking Western theater. Lisa was talking about her trip to Franklin. Frank mentioned his and that the cemetery. But it was a good discussion. And I know at one point, Elsie said someone said something about doing a Civil War Breakfast Club bus trip in the Western theater. Because there was one guy that said, and this is always good to hear too, the discussion piqued his interest enough that he wanted to go to the Western theater because he had primarily been in the Eastern theater. But I am more team Western theater than I am Eastern theater. I do think the Eastern theater is important. Don't get me wrong, those battles all matter too. But I think strategically, the Civil War is won in the West.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think.
Wow, you agree with me?
Well, this thing, but I think I think at least the Eastern theater is kind of like the quarterbacks, the receivers, the running backs of the football team.
Yeah.
In the Western theater is the offensive linemen, those grunt guys with their face masks covered in mud. Although not all battles like that. The one we talked about the other day, the Cheat Mountain, was an Eastern theater one. And I guess it was Virginia, so I guess the theoretically was going towards Ohio.
I think Western theater is anything
west of Mississippi, right?
West of the It is.
I mean, I guess I know. I guess I've seen.
I think it's the Ohio River, isn't it?
I've seen some maps that break it down in different things. I don't know. I've always Eastern theater primarily to me anyway is Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland. In the Western theater, it seems to be almost everything else, including Georgia.
But don't forget the Trans-Mississippi, or else you'll be.
Well, no,
don't piss the Trans-Mississippians off.
Oh, I mean, at one time, I forget who the hell it was. I mentioned, I think I said the Battle of Pea Ridge was in the Western theater, and you thought I would have pissed at the Vatican or something.
Oh, I know.
I remember that.
Well, there are people that, but I mean, Western theater, Trans Mississippi does get lumped into it.
Oh, I know, but people take this shit a little too seriously, I think.
I know, I agree.
Hey, what's going on, Lisa Sammy? We got plans with Lisa today, Mary. It's be very exciting. We got to have fun with them.
That's the truth. Jim will.
That is the truth. That. Oh God, Jim's gonna be. Sure, I hear that phrase 1,000 times today. Yeah, so that'll be cool. That'll be fun. It's always good to see them. They're the best. So
Jim's they're hearing that and he's giggling.
Oh, he's a good dude. His life is about to get turned upside down in his job, so he'll be busy. So as all of our jobs will be busy, but I have a feeling he's gonna have a good time today. I got a feeling Lisa's gonna be driving home to that house today. I got a feeling. This could be a day when old Jim's standing on the bar singing "It's Raining Men." This could be the day. Today could be the day.
She's glaring at you through the screen. But anyway,
he's like, I got my ass dragged to Franklin. I'm doing all this stuff. Today's about me, Lisa. Today's about me.
He loved
I know
Franklin.
he did. I'm
so
sure
cool
he did.
To see. I mean, seeing their pictures makes me want to go there more, and especially since Lisa wrote the poem about Claiborne's fiance Sue, which is really, really awesome. But seeing those pictures of Franklin and then the discussion that we had with people, how it is just hits you differently than other battlefields. Like, I mean, battlefields are sad, they're somber, but for some reason, Franklin especially seems to be that way. Like anybody I've talked to that has been there, it's like one of those, wow, this is a really somber place. Kind of like Andersonville was for us. We both knew Andersonville was going to be somber, but when we stepped out of the car, the mood that was there was like,
and Andersonville's different though.
It is, but you can't describe it to people. Like you just say to people, you have to go. And I think Franklin is one of those battlefields that you'll never know until you go. But I remember when we recorded the episode about Franklin, it was probably the hardest one for me to edit because of I know, but listening to some of the stories.
But some of these places that you've been to, places like the railroad cut at Gettysburg, the sunken road in Antietam, the mule shoe at Spotsylvania, the breastworks at Cold Harbor. A lot of the places we've been, obviously the wilderness is a very negative place. The deep cut at Second Manassas, Bronner's Farm. But there's something about Andersonville that is just a different level. Yeah. Like you step out of the car, and you just feel that. I mean, we've talked a lot about like wilderness. I always thought it was the king of negative energy. When you walk in those woods, you feel it. You just feel negative energy. But when you go to Andersonville, it's a whole new thing.
It's different. I mean, I remember parking the car and getting out, and right in front of me was a thing that said deadline. Yeah. And I remember it was funny. Like, my dad's kind of into Civil War history. He's into history in general. But I remember, telling him that I had been to Andersonville, and he turned around and he's like, that's that really bad place, right? And I said, yeah. He knew, like, he was like, how was it?
There are certain words, that just resonate. Gettysburg, Antietam. But Andersonville, the thing about it though is maybe because I've read John Ransom's diary and I've seen this stuff and you know about Andersonville, but like when you go to the battlefields and you picture you're a soldier, Pickett's Charge, any of these really, really horrific battles, right? If you're a soldier and you're fighting, in the back of your mind, you have some hope. Hopefully I can survive this battle. I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to fight. Andersonville, there was no hope.
No.
You went there and you checked your hope at the door, and you resign yourself that you are probably going to die.
Yeah.
And this isn't specific to me. We've been to Elmira. It's a different feeling. Elmira.
It is. Elmira is sad. I've been Johnson's Island was sad. It was weird, like going to Fort Warren, because the feeling there was, it was one where, well, it kind of sucked here, but then again, it seemed like some of the prisoners there kind of had the run of the, like, it seemed like they were friends with the officers.
Oh, they were playing baseball on the green.
Yeah, I'd love to see Hiram Granberry play baseball with that hair of his.
He's pretty good. He'd probably be halfway decent. But Andersonville just offers a feeling of, you go there and you just, you obviously you've been there. You drive in the area and it has this real dank, negative, rurally type feeling.
Yeah.
And then you go there and you see the little town of Andersonville, which looks like a Twilight Zone episode.
Yes, thinking that.
Yeah, and then you go. Just imagine, and you go to that gate where they walk you in.
Yeah.
And then you're going to deal with the Raiders beating your ass the second you walk in the door. You have to deal the fact that unlike a lot of these these prisons rather, where Elmira, where you for the most part you got a tent, you were put in barracks. They basically said, go find a place in the grass and try to that's going to be and maybe we'll feed you, maybe we won't. We'll do the best we can. But it's just, I didn't think we'd be talking about Andersonville today, but I think
well, we did watch that ghost show about it, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's true. But the reality of Andersonville is that of all the places I've been, it's the one place I've been to where you just feel it. It's a shitty experience you had, and anybody who's been there knows what I'm talking about. And if you haven't been, I would highly suggest you go. Yeah. You fly into Atlanta. You got to want it. It's about 2.5 hours.
It is.
Southeast.
America is way the F out
and
there.
You're going there and you're going back in time as you go. You're going to go by the Jonesboro battlefield. You're going to go on the part of the March to the Sea for a little while, but you're going to get down there and you're going to get to this Americus area, which is just outside of Andersonville. If you do go to the Ruby Tuesdays, it's the only bar in town.
Amazing place. Don't know what the beer selection is like because we were too tired to even drink that night. Oh, by the way, David Maxwell's on here. He said he's playing 1860s baseball tournament this weekend.
Oh, that's awesome. That's pretty cool. They do that. Yeah, there's a lot of that. And I don't know if you know this, Mary. Speaking of baseball, it was Gettysburg Eddie's birthday the other day.
Yes, I know. I saw your post.
And he played 148th birthday. So
Gettysburg Eddie is in my baseball encyclopedia. Yes, I own a baseball encyclopedia.
Oh, he's probably in everybody's baseball. He's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Although
shockingly, my mom, she loved baseball. She had never heard of him until I mentioned him, and then she went and Googled everything about him.
He's actually, he's buried in Evergreen Cemetery. He's with a lot of the folks there. Mm-hmm. His grave is kind of tough to find because he's one of those people where the find a grave map isn't quite right, so you have to kind of line it up with that hotel. But he was someone. What's fascinating about Gettysburg, about Eddie Plank, was he played at Gettysburg College and all this other stuff. He never went to Gettysburg College. No. He was in high school when he played for Gettysburg College. And if you're driving in, if you're going down Route 15 and you're going south, and you get off at the Gettysburg College exit, the first exit that says Gettysburg, and you take that left and you're heading towards town, you're going to get to a place called Eddie Plank's Field or something like that. It's a big housing development. That's the site of his farm, and he learned to pitch by throwing a baseball against his farm wall as his door. Cool. So that was the site of where he grew up. But yeah, he never attended Gettysburg College, but he was good enough to play for him, which is pretty cool.
Interesting. Oh. Yeah. Well, that was like a squirrel moment right there for us. That was the typical Civil War Breakfast Club 80.
But he did not play the Cape Cod Baseball League down there. No. So he would not have been allowed to play the Cape League because he was not enrolled in college. No. So he would not have play for them.
That was a huge digression from Anderson.
Yeah, well, there you go.
It happened. It's the typical ADD style that we do here. But yeah, Andersonville is like just one of those places where like it reminds me of how people talk about Franklin. It's like until you go, you don't know. Like you don't quite get the feeling that's there. And when you hear the stories of like you go in and see the bullet holes still. And I think it just too, we were talking about this. I think the reason why Franklin is just so much more, it kind of is this battle that stands off by itself is because of when it happened, why it happened, and who was killed, and also just the officers that died there, just the sheer, like the slaughter. They're all six, is it six or five, right? All laid out. And I mean, some of the best that they had, Claiborne, Hiram Granberry, Othel Strahl, States Rats, Carter.
John Adams.
John Adams, yeah.
The other John Adams.
Yeah. Not the John Adams, the other John.
No, so if you're hood and you're coming off this, really what the goal was to get to Nashville, you've lost 6 of your premier officers. Yeah. And that's why it begs the question of why he kept going, why you go on.
Well, it was I think it was honestly he wanted to. And Davis agreed with it. Beauregard, I think, had initially told him, "You're crazy. I don't think this is going to work, but you do you." Because Beauregard by that point was in the same similar position to what Robert, and I mentioned this in the episode about Sheep Mountain. Beauregard at the end of the war is in a very similar position to what Robert E. Lee is at the beginning of the war, with kind of being in this administrative role. Davis sends him to West Virginia to try and, gain control over the railways. get down those roads, kind of gain it back for the Confederacy because it's Union occupied at this point. It's not West Virginia during the Battle of Sheep Mountain, it's still Virginia. But at the end of the war, Beauregard is in a very similar role where he's kind of this advisor, but then he's put in charge of the department that Hood is in, but he's told, you can't give orders. If you go see Hood on the field, even though you outrank him, you're not in charge of the army. And it was kind of this, like, you're a figurehead, but you don't have any control. So Hood would run his plans by him, and Beauregard would be like, I don't think this is going to work, but I'll give you a supply of operations. And then Hood went and moved too far away, didn't let Beauregard know. And Beauregard's like, what the F, dude? Like, now I have to, I did all this administrative stuff to get your supply of, like, your supply base, and you moved. He's communicating directly with Davis, and Davis is saying, yes, do it, kind of thing. But I think the idea for Franklin and getting to Nashville came from both Davis and from Hood. And I think it was just this whole,
we've talked about it before. Was Hood was put in charge because he was aggressive, and that was the Davis told him.
He was also in Davis's ear too, and Davis liked him, and Davis didn't like Joseph E. Johnston. He didn't like Beauregard, and Hardee was like, I know someone asked this in the roundtable the other night. I believe Hardee was offered control, like to be commander, and he was like, you know what, no. I don't want to do it. I had someone on Facebook, shockingly, say that Hardee was like overrated and he would have been a shitty commander. And
no, I mean, like, there's no way to know that.
No, but I know, but I was like, really? I thought Hardee was pretty decent of a commander. Like,
no, I thought he was. I mean, I think, when we were talking about about Sheep Mountain, it's fascinating that, if Davis liked you, you were in good shape. If he didn't like you, you weren't. Yeah. I mean, and we talked a lot about why Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard was put in the doghouse. It's because he ran his mouth.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
think about it. If you're the boss, you don't like to have a subordinate running his mouth. Now, they have that very successful first Battle of Manassas. I don't know if you know this, Mary, but the Confederates won that first battle, July of 1864. Yeah, they got him pretty good, but they fell back, and in Beauregard's mind, he's like, he was basically telling people, the press, anybody around, that if Davis didn't tell us to fall back, we could have bagged them right there. And Davis gets wind of this, and he ships them off to the west, the land of the misfit toys, to go deal with all that. And then Joseph E. Johnson is the apple of his eye. And Joseph E. You know why? Because Joseph E. Johnson was pissed they gave up Harper's Ferry, and he was saying all the right things. And Robert E. Lee was a footnote. And that was the thing that if you study that early part of the war, people have this idea that Robert E. Lee turns down command from Winfield Scott, and suddenly he rides in his white horse, like Fabio, and takes over the army, and he's all superhero. And then, but that's not the case.
I thought John Brown Gordon was Fabio.
Well, there's a lot of Fabios. Barksdale could have been Fabio because he had the hair.
He had like
Ambrose Wright could have been Fabio because he had the mullet.
Maybe Howard could have been Fabio.
It's too early for Howard. Trademark MJ Hennion. But
MJ's on here. She said
MJ. But seriously though, is he has his house, Arlington House, and he lets General Sanford, Sanford's the guy who is the one who took over when Lee said no. And no one knows who he is because he got replaced by Irvin McDowell pretty quickly. Yeah. He goes over, he's going to go over the bridge. He's going to take the house. And the people in the South are like, how could you let the Union take George Washington's family's house? How could Lee let this happen? Lee was in charge of the military in Virginia and the Navy for that matter. As soon as that happens, Davis says, I'm taking control of the army from you. Your army, although you're still going to have your title, he was still colonel at this point, is you're going to be in charge of Virginia, but Virginia is going to fall under my jurisdiction in the Confederate States of America, right? And so he was a man without a country, and he ends up working at that desk, and he's sitting there where he meets Walter Taylor, and who becomes basically one of his secretaries, who stays with him.
Am I just like wrong, or is Walter Taylor kind of a douchebag?
I don't know. I mean,
I don't like him. I don't know why. I think it's because
the problem with Walter Taylor was Smithers in The Simpsons, right? Where he was a toady to Lee. him and John Marshall, this is why the whole thing with Stuart's so ridiculous at Gettysburg, is they became his confidants and they became his protectors as it went on. But at the beginning of the war, Lee is blamed by the Southern media and the South, and the Governor Pickens of South Carolina, who hated him severely.
Yeah.
Because he gave up Arlington and thought that he didn't have the heart to fight for the rebellion and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until really this West Virginia thing kind of went down, because after McClellan gets pulled out, after Rich Mountain, Philippi, all these battles, he comes to take over Army of the Potomac from McDowell. And then what happens? Davis needs a guy to go to Western Virginia to take over for some of these Confederate guys, because William Loring, as we found out by studying it, was sitting around doing a hell of a lot of nothing, kind of like you on a weekday, just sitting around. And it ends up, he needs a guy to go up there and babysit Loring. And he looks around and goes, well, Beauregard I hate. Johnson's doing well here. I'm not sure who else I can do. So I guess you, Lee, come here. I'll put you in the field. And of course, Lee's like, my big chance.
Yeah.
And he goes to Cheat Mountain and he gets out there and he can't take over for Loring. So he has, and then Loring sees him. Oh, by the way, Lee is the one who put Loring in command there. And now he sees this guy coming in to babysit. And it ends up being the whole time.
Well, didn't Lee also have a feety pajama sleepover with Taylor?
Well, he stayed in the same tent with Walter Taylor and with Augustine Washington. They shared their tent. They shared their water basin, which whatever the hell that means. And they also had two assistants, the two black aides who came with them, Meredith, and I forget the other guy's name. But Lee was there kind of just sitting around, and he gets there and he sees the Union position and goes, Loring, we can just run through these guys right now. And Loring's like, my guys all have the measles and it's been raining for 2 straight weeks.
Freaking suck.
I know it doesn't suck, but you know what else sucks? Getting shot. That sucks. And so he's thinking, I have an opportunity here, Martin Sheen voice, to go ahead and run right through these guys, take Cheat Mountain, break the whole army up, break up that Union position, maybe keep them out of the Shenandoah Valley, maybe even open the door to attack Ohio someday, which I would have been a huge in favor of, by the way. Just saying. By the way, go where the hell Ohio State's playing today. Just saying. But that's the whole thing, though. And Lee gets up there, and because he has to wait all this time for Loring to finally meet with him to decide a game plan, Lee realizes there's a road behind Cheat Mountain that's vulnerable. Yeah. And he's sitting around going, let's go. And by the time Loring finally gets ready to do something, guess what? The Union Army blocks the road, and now they're screwed. And it leads to that entire plan that turned to what was called a Battle of Cheat Mountain, where there really wasn't a battle. It really wasn't.
No, it's still an interesting study, though. And we had a comment on our YouTube video of the episode that was basically, the person was agreeing with us that, yes, studying these smaller battles, helps you understand the larger battles more. It helps you understand the decisions that were made. It's kind of like, but sometimes there's stuff that happens at bigger battles that factors into smaller battles that don't get studied as much. For instance, like, it's a Howard example, but Battle of Ezra Church was where Howard has his redemption, and no one really studies that one because it's just a battle in the Atlanta campaign. It's so small. But that's where he has his redemption. You can see that he's learned from Chancellorsville there. What happens at, what Lee does at Cheat Mountain is going to factor into later decisions he makes in the Civil War. And that's why it's important to study. And it's also important to study it to see how Lee was treated at the beginning of the war. He's not the rock star that Joseph E. Johnston is, or even Albert Sidney Johnston, which Albert Sidney Johnston was another guy that came up at our roundtable the other night. And it was Nate that asked, would he have been as good as what people say? And Nate admitted he's like me. He goes back and forth on it. And I go back and forth on Albert Sidney Johnston about, if he would have been good or not. And the reason is because Davis is the one that said, if we lose Johnston, then we've lost everything. And I really take Davis's opinion on commanders with a grain of salt, because he does not have a good track record with selecting commanders in the Western Theater.
No, the problem with Davis, we've said this before, and I don't know if we mentioned it when we did the episode on Cheat Mountain, but Lee was writing a lot to his wife Mary, and he was saying things along the lines, and when he lost his command, when his army got usurped
Yeah.
Big word right there for you, Mary. Usurped
Wow.
into the CSA. He was like, his wife was basically like, you should be in charge of the entire thing. And he's like, you know.
She was one of
And
those women.
see, Lee, the thing about Lee is Lee could have been a good president. And Davis might have been a halfway decent commander, but they, you know, obviously
Yeah.
Lee was someone who was better off in the field, but
Didn't
it took
Davis
a while.
fight in the same war as Abraham Lincoln?
The Black Hawk War.
Yes, the Black Hawk War.
Yeah, that's a
Don't
word.
make that mistake again.
You want to say it that one. But for real though, he was a guy who had to prove himself. And in Cheat Mountain, I mean, don't forget too, you get Augustine Washington killed, which was a big friggin' deal.
Yeah.
And so he gets back to Richmond. It was ironically, it was Halloween, 1861, and everyone hates Robert because he's blamed for losing Cheat Mountain. Yeah. And a lot of it was because the media, the Richmond newspapers, they were basically saying that all these great things Lee was doing in the mountains. Wait till you see what Robert E. Lee's doing. And he was doing nothing because it was raining for 22 straight days. And the guys all had measles. And by the way, Loring wanted nothing to do with them. So they were all. I
don't blame Loring. I mean, I just, you get like the babysitter comes in. It's probably the same way Hood was with Beauregard, although Hood knew he didn't have any power. So he was probably sitting there like, why are you here, dude? Like,
but you realize it must have been. So Lee is a guy who wanted very much to be in the field. And he had been chained to a desk for a while after being blamed for losing Arlington House. Losing Alexandria, right off the bat, he loses these, and he gets out in the field. He gets out there and he realizes he's got to restrain himself. When he, by all intents and purposes, he could have told Loring, and the horse you rode in on, I'm taking over, but he didn't. And and when you look at later battles, when you look at later Robert E. Lee, you look at up until Gettysburg, he'd always been kind of, I don't want to say aloof, but he'd always been a macro manager. He wanted you to take this hill, but he wouldn't tell you how to do it. And that was his consistent all the way through, right?
Though.
Right. Well, I mean, he would tell you, like, you look at the echelon attack at Gettysburg. He empowered Longstreet. He empowered Richard Anderson. He empowered McLaws, but he didn't tell anybody who was in charge. So, but they would say, this is what I want. I want you to set up, find the flank and roll them like a blanket. I don't care how you do it, but just do it. And they had to figure out themselves. And you have command and control issues all the way through that part on July 2nd of 1863. But here, he was even aloof to even take control. Yeah. So he learned from that. But he was never a micro. He was never a Stonewall Jackson type of commander who would tell you, I want you to do this, I want you to do this, and that's what Ewell's problem was at Gettysburg when he took over. He was used to being told specifically what to do, and when he got a little bit of gray area to use his judgment, he did not. That was the big change between the two. But he ultimately did take command from William Loring, but that was after August 31st, 1861, when he got that full general status. Yeah. Right? Because don't forget, Loring's a general at that point. Lee's a colonel. Yeah. So now that Lee is a general, Loring is like, all right, you know what? You want to take over, take over. I don't even care anymore. He turned into a disgruntled office temp at that point.
Kind of like Lee, Ellis Spear.
Yeah. And he let Lee kind of take over, which is, which is interesting, because then he could kind of like, all right, now I got a plan. I can do this. I can do this. And you can see Lee at that point take over. And he did the same exact thing. He let Albert Russ control this part of the battlefield. He's going to have guys, Henry Jackson do a certain part of it. He's going to have Samuel R. Anderson take care of a certain thing. And he's like, here's what I want. You boys figure it out. I'm going to be hanging out with Augustine whittling. You have a good time.
Bob is on here from Charlotte, so good morning to him. And Private Maine is on here. He's watching, or they are watching from New Hampshire, and said, Maine is where my unit is based out of. We portrayed the 3rd Maine Infantry. Oh my God, isn't that Howard's guys? Originally, 3rd Maine. 3rd Maine was Oliver Otis Howard's
Moses Lakeman, right? Speaking of Gettysburg, right?
So cool.
I want to know a guy named Private Maine in New Hampshire. That's anybody who knows anybody. I know, but anybody from Maine hates New Hampshire. Trust me, I know that.
But he said Maine's where that's so cool. 3rd Maine Infantry.
Those Black Bear versus Wildcat college hockey games are a blast at UNH and UMaine. But
I'm sure Private Maine has read this before, but Howard's account of when he came into command of the 3rd Maine is really funny.
Well, you would think somebody in Private Maine would have to be in a civil regiment from Maine. Kind of no choice, right? Kind of like states' rights gist. It kind of labels you.
What would have been amazing if states' rights was like to his mom and dad, you know what? I'm a union guy.
Well, it's Third Maine's a good regiment, and they don't get a lot of publicity because when you're talking about since one of these days we're allegedly going to have Tom Huntington on to talk about Maine at Gettysburg if somebody would actually email the guy, but you're talking about specifically Maine's got a great Civil War history. I mean, anybody from New England knows that. But speaking, since we mentioned Gettysburg and Pitzer's Woods, Third Maine, you've got Heath with the 19th, who doesn't get a lot of credit by saving Julian Weir's ass.
Yeah, Private Maine just said we fought Peach Orchard at Gettysburg.
Yep. There's a lot, and they had a lot of good stuff they had to do. But everybody talks about the 20th, and obviously I pushed the 16th quite a bit. But you look at the 17th, and you look at the 19th, and you look at the 5th, you look at the 3rd. I mean, you look at guys like Greenleaf Stephen, you look at McGilvery. Maine's an all-star team at Gettysburg, and they don't get a lot of credit because the guy with the mustache on the hill gets all the credit. But the reality is, Moses Lakeman, he was a tough break too.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. The Private Maine reenacts. That's awesome. Third Maine is just, they've always got a special spot for me because they're Howard's first command. He gets up to speak and he's like so nervous. He describes how he feels. He's so nervous. And
speaking of the Third Maine, who hated Howard from that regiment was Abner Small.
Yep.
Who ended up going to the 16th with Charles Tilden, but no, Maine history is great. We had a lot of fun talk about them in the past. And there's a book called Maine at Gettysburg. We're going to have the author on with us for a book club meeting, and that's going to be a good thing. So welcome to this Private Maine.
Welcome, Private Maine. We're happy to have you as part of it.
That's pretty cool.
That's very cool. That's cool. MJ Motivaker's another Howard reference. Oh, Frank's on here. So good morning, Frank. And Frank, he always comes on and whatever battle anniversary it is, he is so good about reminding us 159th anniversary of the fall of Atlanta today.
That's true. That is true. We were talking about that earlier. That's a big deal for people who study that part of the battle too. Yeah. May 7th, 1864 up until September 2nd, 1864, you've got that slow grind that march towards Atlanta. And it's fascinating when you look at the history of that.
Which means David Ireland has, a week to live?
Yeah, he hasn't had much time, unfortunately. He gets to Atlanta, he moves into John Bell Hood's headquarters, and then he gets sick of the dysentery and dies, which is always sad.
Yeah, Private Maine says it's in New Hampshire and I hate Massachusetts.
We hate New Hampshire too. Don't worry about it. It's all good. Hey, but you know what though? We're happy to support your economy, Private Maine. It's all good. And thanks for the fireworks too. You know what's funny about we used to actually I actually enjoy New Hampshire, seriously. There's a place called Russell Pond, which is up heading that up towards Lincoln, New Hampshire, which is great camping, which is great. But New Hampshire, there's bears everywhere. But I actually enjoy New Hampshire. New Hampshire's a great state. It's a lot of fun. There's some cool places in New Hampshire.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, it's a beautiful. I want to explore it more. And I obviously love Maine too. Maine is one of my favorite states next to Massachusetts. Yeah. New Hampshire is beautiful. But yeah, like the fall of Atlanta is like, it's one of those things that, I mean, Sherman's it is a huge deal. It probably does seal the election for Lincoln, but I do think two other things need to happen. One of them is Early does not need to be in Washington. And the other is Sheridan in the Valley does play, Maine asked, you guys ever been to Franconia Notch?
Yeah, that campsite I was telling you about is not far from Franconia Notch. Now I was up there, not too far. Where the hell was I? This is a couple of years ago now. There was a campsite that we went up there. I remember because there was no internet, which is brutal. But Franconia Notch is beautiful. That's a great place. There's a lot of cool places out there. But the camping and some of the breweries up there, Mary, you'd love New Hampshire.
Oh, I know. And Frank is on his way to Chicago, and he's wondering if there's any good Lincoln type sites to explore there. I think there's a good museum there, Frank, that has it's got some Lincoln artifacts there. I personally have never been to Chicago. I think there's probably a Lincoln statue.
It definitely is a Lincoln. There's a statue right by the big park there. Millennial Park. There's a big Lincoln statue. The one he's sitting in the chair. He's kind of standing up and the chair's behind him, and he's got there's that statue. But Chicago, that's where Camp Douglas is. You can go see the Civil War the prison up there. It's mostly where the University of Chicago is now. There's not much left of it. But there's not a lot of Civil War in Chicago, believe it or not.
I think there's not, I mean, and like, Frank, are you going to go to Springfield? Because Springfield's really cool. There's the, was it like, obviously the Lincoln House, there's the Library Museum, which is an amazing museum. And there's tons of stuff there. There's some good breweries there too. Maine said, I have a friend from Franklin, Mass, and he loves to rip me for living in New Hampshire and likes to joke about the old man in the mountain falling.
See, so the old man in the mountain was a rock formation in the mountains, and it had, from the side, it looked like a face. And they called it the old man in the mountain. And I have a lot of friends when I was in college who I used to tell them, the old man in the mountain will collapse before the University of New Hampshire hockey team ever wins a national title.
Wow.
And I was saying it as a joke. Guess what happened? It collapsed, and they still haven't won a national title. I was right. But there's a lot of cool places up there. Conway or North Conway is a great place to go. Which is if you're up in that area, there's a lot of cool places. Good New Hampshire talk today, Mary. Good New Hampshire talk.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, you go way the hell up there. You're going back in time.
Well, I mean, Leeds, when we went to Maine last year and we've stayed in Brunswick, which is an amazing town. Joshua Lawrence's Chamberlain's house is great. Private Maine, have you ever been to, I'm assuming you've probably been to Brunswick, Maine, and been to Chamberlain's house. That place is cool. But then we went to Leeds, and of course I'm expecting, first of all, I'm going to get a hoodie that says Leeds, Maine on it, and I'm going to be cool.
You may have to make up your own to do that.
I know. And secondly, I'm going to go to a bar and I'm going to talk to the locals about Howard. Neither happened.
Yeah, there's no bar. There's no bar.
Humbled by Leeds, Maine. But the cool thing about it, though, is there is the statue that Howard and his brother put up on this hill, which was a mile, which tells me those guys must have been in good shape to walk up that hill. And
it wasn't that bad.
No, but then you started talking about bears, and I was like, no bears. But the monument was really cool because they put it up there for all the men who died from Leeds, and there couldn't have been that many of them. But when you think of a small town, it must have been really affected by the Civil War. And then we drove around aimlessly looking for where Howard's house was.
Yeah, but there's a lot of cool places in Maine. I mean, New Hampshire's got some good Civil War. Massachusetts has some good Civil War. But Maine, I would say, realistically speaking, out of all the New England states, it probably has the most Civil War that you can go to.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's all the Chamberlain crap at Brunswick, and there's that little mini.
Yeah, which Private Maine said he's been there.
Yeah, I mean, if you go up to Brewer, his hometown, they have the replica of Little Round Top, but instead of Gouverneur K. Warren, it's Chamberlain on there, which is kind of weird, but that's the way it is. But there's a lot of cool stuff, though. But when you study some of the people, guys like Heath, guys like Lakeman, guys like McGilvery, guys like Stevens, not just Chamberlain, there's a lot of like legit Civil War there. And it doesn't get a lot of credit for it because I think Chamberlain does overshadow a lot of it. Obviously, Tilden, we talk about over around Castine, Maine. There's a bunch of stuff you can go to. And it seems like it's when you're going through Maine, certain portions of it, as you go through it, it's something there's just as much Civil War there as it's like you're driving through Maryland. Every other exit is something Civil War. You know, we found the house that Joshua Chamberlain died in. Remember?
Yep. That was cool doing that. Yeah, that was in Portland that we found that. So that was really cool doing that. And, you know, being in Brunswick and going to Joshua's Tavern was awesome. Even seeing Leeds, as small of a town as it was, actually it's not even a town, it's like a little village. And, you know, the girl that works at the Historical Society having to tell me there's really nothing here. On
the good side of it, you're probably seeing the same things that Howard and his family. We did find Howard's parents' graves. We did see. Well,
we found his dad. His mom is buried with his brother out west, and his dad's buried there because his dad died when he was 9, I think. Oh, hey Amanda. Hey Amanda, our Frank is going to Chicago. You got any historical sites for him to go
Frank,
to?
speaking of Chicago, you must go to Lou Malnati's at the pizza place. Definitely go to that because that's my favorite pizza place in Chicago.
Private Maine says he's in Colonel Cross's hometown, Lancaster, New Hampshire.
Yeah. Yep.
That's really
Edward
cool.
Edward Cross. He's obviously speaking of Gettysburg, and he got killed at Gettysburg, and he's a guy who part of that 5th New Hampshire who he doesn't get a lot of credit too. He's the guy who put the black bandana on his head.
Oh,
Gettysburg,
that's the
right?
guy.
So he had the red one, and he got shot. He
Wow.
got shot by a sharpshooter. You know,
I didn't realize, and he was the one that put it on, and he always wore the red bandana, right?
right? And you can go see the rock where he was killed.
I
He
think
actually
he's taken me there before.
his body was taken just beyond the Tawny Town Road. If you go where the I'm trying to think if people know where it is. There's like a maintenance shed on the Tawny Town Road if you're going down the road. Right across the street, there's like a little field, and sometimes there's horses in there. If you go in the field, there's a rock, a bunch of rocks with a bunch of trees in the middle of it, and that's where he actually died. So it's pretty cool.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
I don't know. There's so many like places on battlefields you go where the people died and all that, which is just like and Private Vincent, I'll try to find his birth home, do some adventuring. That's cool. That is what is so fun about doing Civil War stuff is like, yeah, there's some stuff that's really easy to find, but then there's the stuff like, okay, where did this happen? Like the search for Chamberlain's, the house where he died was really something.
That was actually an unexpected adventure too.
It was fun to do that. But then, when we're driving around looking for the house where Howard lived in Leeds, we were like, where is it? And Howard had a pretty vivid description of it. And it was one like you couldn't miss it because it was up on a hill, but we figured it was probably demolished, unfortunately. But that's what's cool about this is finding these places, like lately when so I commute to Boston for work because I work at an academic library there. And I've been really into the story of Hiram Granberry and his wife, Fanny Sims Granberry, been into that story because there is one story which I know you believe and I believe that when he was in Boston in prison in Fort Warren, that she was here as well. And I walk, on Winter and Summer Street up to Park all the time. And I sometimes wonder, I'm like, did she walk on this street? Did she go to the Common? She would have been down at
probably
a seaport.
Probably.
She would have been in that area. And I wonder, what was she seeing that I'm seeing? Is the street I'm walking on the same one she did?
She would have seen a lot of Tremont Street was exactly the same. Tremont Temple is there, the churches are there, the Commons there. She would have seen the Granary Cemetery. She would have seen the Customs House. She would have seen all the bars down there. She was in Green Dragon.
Oh, that's
Bella
true. Yeah,
she would have seen
if maybe
Oyster House.
Yeah, I wondered if maybe she went out there for food or something. But then again, she would have been
maybe she was out getting banged up while her husband was in jail.
I don't think Fanny was.
Maybe Fleet Week was there and she was getting her swerve on Mary.
Fleet Week.
I don't know.
I don't think Fanny was that way. But it's interesting when you go on these adventures and like what Private Main's saying. He said, Lancaster's not a big a town, so it probably won't be hard to find. Go out and do that because it's fun and you feel like you've really found something and you're more of a part of that human side of the history. MJ mentioned Frost told Hancock on July 2nd that Gettysburg was his last battle.
Yeah, that's the controversy with him because Hancock rides up to him and says, and Hancock says to Frost, today you're going to get your star, meaning you're going to be your general. Mm-hmm. And he goes, no, general, today's my last battle. And there was always that controversy. People seem to think that he thought it was a premonition of death. But a lot of people thought he was pissed that he was still a colonel and he was going to quit because he wasn't getting a star. And that's the debate. Then he gets killed and no one knows. Yeah. But the fact that he put on a black bandana is probably something along the line.
I know. And I picture him looking like Steve Van Zandt from
he's not even close. No,
I know, but I don't know. Whenever I think of
he was a portly fellow. He was a big guy. He wore reenactor cut clothes. But for the most part, he actually got killed. You can actually see the exact spot where the sharpshooter was who fired at him too. And if you go to the 5th New Hampshire Monument, it's a cool monument with a bunch of looks like a rock formation. That's right around there is when he was killed. But he was a guy who got killed pretty early in it as they went through. But he's a fascinating guy. Edward Cross is just one of those nameless and faceless people, to steal a word from Lisa. Who doesn't really get studied unless you really get in the weeds of the battles.
Yeah. And Scott just asked, did he get the star even though he was killed?
I don't think so. I don't. That's a good question. You know, I do not know. That's a good question. If he got it posthumously or whatever it was, but he got killed probably within an hour after he told Hancock that, and he was still colonel. So, but a lot of that wheat field. I mean, when you you can spend an entire day at the wheat fields. I mean, people roll through there in the car tour and they stop and they go to the monuments. But you got 26 acres of wheat in George Rose's, wheat field, and you can study and what's cool about the wheat field is you can look at the monuments and you can see the corps emblems. You can see the third corps, the fifth corps, the second corps, and they're all mixed up. And if you don't understand the corps emblems, it's a complete and utter mess.
Yeah.
And when you realize that whole wheat field got turned on its ear, because that South Carolina regiment got the wrong orders and they exposed their flank to Bigelow's guns and basically if you study it and you realize that's what's cool about history is the little things that change it. And because of that order, it destabilized the entire wheat field that led to that back and forth fighting with the Irish Brigade and Zook and John Rutter Brooke and all these guys who came in and out of there fighting against G.T. Anderson and eventually Barksdale's, the remnants of his guys coming from the other side. And then you've got Paul Semm's guys, and you've got the remnants of Kershaw's guys, and you can just imagine the complete utter mess it was. And then it spills a little further north, where the great Cadmus Wilcox Mary is going to be slowed down by the First Minnesota, and then you've got David Lang, and you've got Ambrose Wright, and you've got Billy Mahone. It goes right down the line, and it's fascinating to study that battle because it's one of those battles. July 2nd, 1863 is a fascinating study because when you study it, you can see how Lee's plan, that echelon attack, that domino thing is going to make sense, but the little things screw you up. As you mentioned, I mentioned Lang's Floridians, Perry's brigade. And what's a great story about that too is you're looking at of those Floridians going into that 2nd, 5th, and 8th Florida, going across the field, heading towards the Emmitsburg Road. There's the 11th Mass and the 26th Pennsylvania. And they think the Floridians are the 1st Massachusetts skirmishers, sharpshooters falling back, and they just sit there and wait until the rebels are right on them and they start blowing them away.
Yeah.
So you can just imagine the confusion of how the whole thing must have went.
Yeah.
And poor Joseph Carr, by the way, because he doesn't know. He thinks the 1st Massachusetts is coming. He doesn't realize they've already fallen back and they've attached themselves to the line of the 11th Mass. Yep. So now here comes the Floridians. And he's sitting back going, don't worry about it. They're not NASCAR fans. They're one of us. I promise. Don't you worry about it. And then they get there. And finally, Lang's like, fire. They get up there and start firing. They must have been stunned. But that's what happens in battle. That's why it's the fog of war, they call it.
Exactly. It happens in a lot of battles. There's some comments here. So Benjamin, aka his name is Glowjam, his name's Benjamin. He said he was watching episode 114 when the live notification popped up, but he couldn't stop watching until he found out what happened with the Colonel Russ situation.
Oh, Colonel, that was some intrigue with Colonel Russ. So, the thing about Russ, and the thing about him, Albert Russ is an interesting fella because he's not a West Point guy. He's a politician from the 2nd Arkansas District of Arkansas. And he's famous because he beat the piss out of Horace Greeley with a cane in Washington, D.C. And he's famous again because he sees Horace Greeley a couple of weeks later in the streets of D.C. And guess what he does? He beats him up again. The guy at the New York Tribune, right? The abolitionist. He ends up getting the 3rd Arkansas with no experience. And because he finds that back route to the summit of Cheat Mountain, he gets to take his 1,500 guys and he gets pantsed by the 14th Indiana, right?
Yeah.
Under your boy there. Nathan Kimball.
Oh yeah, Kimball. Yeah, that's right. I was like, when you said boy, I'm like, Howard.
so Rust, he's basically got 1,500, 2,000 guys. He's going up against maybe 250, maybe 300 men. And he catches some skirmishers and he says, and the skirmishers say, yeah, well, there's 5,000 Union guys up there. They're all entrenched. We got helicopters. We got machine guns. We got everything dinosaurs up there. And so Russ goes, oh shit. So he gets lied to, but he takes the bait
Yeah.
and he falls back down the mountain. Meanwhile, Lee is on the other end
And he's
waiting
like,
for
"Where are
those
cannons?"
because the battle's supposed to start on the attack, and Russ never attacks, and they're all sitting around.
And they're like,
And
"Where's
poor
the
Lee's like,
campfire?"
any minute, boys, any minute. And they're all like, the boy who cry wolf finally goes, find the hell with it. And he calls the whole goddamn thing off.
Yeah.
And then he finds out later what happens. And whoever the soldiers were who lied to Rust, they should get a Medal of Honor.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty
him.
sure it was Kimball that was like, if you get captured, here's what you need to do. I just want to mention too, Private Maine placed the flag at the 5th New Hampshire Monument. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And he said loves Gettysburg. So Frank said that Gettysburg the happiest place on earth, which I agreed with.
Yeah, especially if you with the mine at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. And then Private Maine mentions they want to get to Antietam sometime. So I said, we get to Antietam, it's an amazing place, but also South Mountain as well. Good morning,
Yeah,
Lynn.
absolutely.
Lynn was on our roundtable the other night too. She's in Gettysburg.
Oh no! Oh wow, she's in God's country. Outstanding. That's a great. We'll be there in a couple of weeks, Mary, for our big event at the National Civil War Museum.
3 weeks.
Yep.
But South Mountain, like if you're at Antietam, you should go to South Mountain because it is like this amazing precursor to the Battle of Antietam. It's where the Iron Brigade gets their name, and whether it was McClellan or Hooker, we don't know. I know people get really like bent out of shape if you say it was Hooker or if you say it was McClellan. Like the people will go at each other like, no, it was Hooker, no, it was McClellan. It's like, does it matter? They're the Iron Brigade. But it's a really interesting place to visit where they went up those 3 gaps, all because of Order 191.
No, so Lynn, if you go to South Mountain, you got to go to the George Washington statue. I mean, the George Washington Tower.
Yeah.
And you can climb your ass up there and you can see the entire area. It's the Antietam battlefield. But Antietam is an amazing, amazing place. Just understand, for those who haven't been, it's not Gettysburg. There's not a lot of restaurants, not a lot of bars, there's no hotels. You're gonna have to stay outside if you're gonna stay in the area. But it is immaculate. You go to that Burnside Bridge, you go to the Sunken Road, you go to Dunkard Church, you go to the cornfield. It's pristine. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, but it's a day trip. Unless you stay out of town, you come back in. But that's how it is. But there's a lot of when you're talking that area, you're talking South Mountain, you're talking Shepherdston, you're talking Harper's Ferry, you're talking Monterey Pass, you're talking Monocacy. There's all kinds of places to visit. Within that, maybe that 1 hour radius of Gettysburg, there are so many cool
Monocacy. Yeah, that's another place. So Private Maine. And I think Lynn has been to Monocacy, but Private Maine, Monocacy is another amazing place to visit. I think it's only like half an hour from Gettysburg. Some comments here. So Paul said he's reading Hartwood's little volume on Antietam, says it's really good. Private Maine mentions he's a big fan of the Iron Brigade, so he definitely wants to go to South Mountain. So I recommended Eric Scheinlein's book, Black Iron Mercy.
Yeah, it's a historical fiction book.
Yeah, but if you were into the Iron Brigade,
the fictional story of Private Jenkins, that's a good story. That's a good one. But the thing about it is you have a lot of. That's the thing, and I tell. I mean, Gettysburg is my dream place too. But I always tell the people who go to Gettysburg and stay in that 717, expand out a little bit.
Yeah.
Go to Chambersburg. You can go see where McCausland burnt the freaking town down. Yeah. You can go a little bit further north to Harrisburg. You go to Carlisle. You go to York. Even go to Hunterstown. There's all kinds of places all around that area that tell that important story of the Battle of Gettysburg. Well, actually, more so the campaign of Gettysburg. But most people admittedly go there for the weekend and they see the battlefield and they get the hell out. But if you're there, if you go there more times than you probably should, you can kind of expand out a little bit because there's so many cool places to go. You take that Lee Highway going towards Chambersburg, go through Cashtown. You see so many monuments. You go see Thaddeus Stevens, his ironworks. You go see that place. There's a lot of cool places in that area to go check out, which is not part of the battlefield.
Private Maine just said that they need to start in Gettysburg and just make their way around. But yeah, Monocacy is one. Lee's Retreat from Gettysburg is amazing too.
You go to Frederick, you go see Francis Blair's house. You go to some good breweries in Fredericksburg.
There are,
by the way.
Chambersburg, like Darren mentioned, go see it. But yeah, Antietam, South Mountain, there's so many places to see. in that area, and just, you kind of take a week and make Gettysburg kind of your home base and just branch out from there. And you can see so much stuff as well. And speaking of Antietam, Paul mentions that Racino, who was one of the co-authors of The Tale Untwisted, which I need to read. MJ mentioned she needs to read. You need to read it too. But there's a follow-up book coming out about Lee, which is, I think, kind of it's the companion to it. So I know our friend Shanna, she is like McClellan's champion, and it's awesome.
Right.
She said Tale Untwisted, it's an amazing book.
Yeah, I think what's good about this is, we've said this many, many times, where people kind of fall into that trap of learning one or two things, getting that baseline knowledge and not expanding down. McClellan's one that deserves a lot more study, but even Lee, there was something I saw on whatever the hell Twitter is called nowadays, where they were talking about Lee's decision to turn down the position and go to the Confederacy. And
I saw that.
Right. And there's so much that goes into that. And when you realize that the country back then was more of a loose confederation of states anyway, so you can see why he would have and why some people wouldn't have. But Lee's a fascinating study himself, personally. I don't want to say he had daddy issues, but he kind of did, though. With Light Horse Harley, he did, though, because a lot of the stuff he did was, there's that story he talked about. What was it when Lee was doing his grand farewell tour, when he was going down south? One of the first places he visited was his father's grave. Yeah, I think it's in North Carolina. I think that's where he's back. And I know he died overseas, but he kind of takes a sullen type of 360 view of his own life at that point. Yeah. And he even talks about going back to Cheat Mountain. In 1840, he was going through the mountains, and he was going down that same road now in 1861. He wrote to Mary, he says, if somebody would have told me in 1840 that I was going, the next time I'd be on this road, be under this circumstances, I would have thought you were insane. Mm-hmm. So you can tell he struggled with this Union thing all along. He really did. But I think, the fighting for his state at the end of the day trumped everything for him, but he never got over it. He never did.
Frank Lusher, he has daddy issues.
He did, though. He totally did.
We had daddy issues.
I mean, don't forget, his father ditched the family.
Oh, I know.
His father wasted all the money and basically left him and his mother and just ditched him. And then he dies overseas, and they, by all accounts, the Lee family struggled. Yeah, and I think
he didn't have much money when he married Mary.
No, and he ends up obviously marrying. He definitely married up in that regard with the whole Washington thing. But he ended up, I think, kind of, I don't know if he was trying to live the life that he thought his father should have militarily. Mm-hmm. But I always thought it was fascinating that his father was an aide to George Washington, and he finds himself with George Washington's heir being his aide at Cheat Mountain.
I know,
and that's why history is cool, though. Is that his life is life comes at you pretty fast, Mary, as Ferris Bueller once said, speaking in Chicago, right? Yep. Is the irony of it all when everything spins around, and now Now he's in charge of Washington's heir, and he was very protective of John Augustine Washington III, and that's why I think he suffered with that guilt after Washington was killed. Because don't forget, Lee allowed him to go with Rudy. Yep. And he said, "Okay, you go." It's a lot when Hardy's kid got killed at Bentonville. Yeah, right?
That is Hardy's kid getting killed at Bentonville is something that just it stuck with me. Or it sticks with me because it's you're at the last battle. You don't know it's the last battle, but you're at the last battle, and your kid's like, "Dad, can I go in?" And Hardy's like, "Yeah, what can it hurt?" And the kid gets killed. And it's so sad because I think he's 17 years old. He's a cavalry guy, and he just and I think Hardy was like, "It's not going to be that bad." But then the other part of the story too is, and sorry, Howard reference, Howard writes about it in his memoirs, about how someone came across the lines to deliver him a message to let him know that Hardy's boy had been killed because Howard had been his math tutor at West Point. And
it's all personal for these guys.
Howard was like, what? He was like, what? Because Howard at that point, he had I don't know, he and Liz had tons of children, but I think he had like his oldest probably would have been about, I don't know, like 12 at that point. But still, it's like, if you're a parent, like that's, and you find out this kid that you know, your friend's kid has been killed, it's like, geez, so close to the end.
No, but by all accounts and by a lot of the stories written, you know, Colonel Washington's death dramatically affected Lee, dramatically affected him,
Yeah.
you know, because he authorized him to go along the scouting mission with Rooney, and they run into an ambush. And you can imagine exactly how it went. They see the single soldier, this Union guy sitting on a gray horse, kind of in the middle of this field, sitting around. Who the hell knows what he's doing? But he's by himself. And Rooney sees him and it's like, we'll leave this alone. And Washington goes, let's get him. And of course, Rooney's like, yeah, let's get him. Because that's how he was.
That would be Rooney.
They go racing full speed to get them. And all of a sudden, soldiers come out of the woods and start firing upon him. They go into an ambush. Rooney doesn't get shot. He gets thrown off of his horse. Augustine gets shot 3 times in the butt. That's where he gets shot. He falls off his horse. Rooney, being the soldier he is, jumps on Augustine's horse and takes off and leaves him.
And then they need to know about Rooney Lee.
The Union soldiers rummage through his pockets. He's Augustine's dead at this point. They find out who he is. They realize he has 2 pistols. They give one to they realize it's George Washington's heir. One of the guys who allegedly was the trigger man who killed him, I don't know how the hell they would have known, gives him the gun. The other gun goes to Simon Cameron, the Secretary of War, who cherishes it for the rest of his war as some kind of prize.
I wonder if he took it over to Russia with him when Lincoln shipped him over.
Oh, I don't know. And then of course Washington's heir being killed. He's the last living heir to Mount Vernon because he had sold Mount Vernon to the Ladies Auxiliary Group in 1858, right around there. And he ends up basically being the subject of the media, North and South. The South is like, I can't believe Washington's heir was killed, and the North is like, good, screw him, he's a traitor.
Can't believe he deflected.
And then where do they bury Augustine? They bury him at Charlestown, right around the corner from where John Brown was executed, and not in Mount Vernon. And I tried to find out why they buried him there, and I could not figure out a way. It's almost like they said, you know what? You think Brown's a traitor? We're going to bury a traitor right near where you killed him. That's how it seems in Charlestown, West Virginia.
I definitely agree with that. So Lynn agrees that Lee totally had daddy issues. He said,
he definitely did.
Lynn said she just finished Crucible of Command on Lee and Grant, and that follows them both through the war, how they led their relationships with presidents and their officers, that's really cool. She said she listened to the Audible version. Have a great weekend, Paul. Private Main said they really want to do an Iron Brigade reenactment impression. I have a Hardy hat, which Darren gave me.
Oh, the hell
it's in Gettysburg. It's in Gettysburg.
Oh, okay. You know, another good book you want to read on that is a book called The Man Who Would Not Be Washington by Jonathan Horn. It talks a lot about Robert E. Lee's non-war life. And it really talks about his relationship with Augustine Washington. It talks about his issues with his father. It talks a lot about the post-war, and it just talks about how he could have been the Southern George Washington, but it wasn't. And it talks about the parallels between Washington and the Lee family. So get that book. It's called The Man Who Would Not Be Washington. Check that one out, because if you like the book about the Crucible one, you'll like that one. It's a very good read. It's an easy read too. It's not a tough read.
And getting back to the Iron Brigade, like, I'm sure Private Main knows this, but the story behind their uniform comes from John Gibbon, and they hated that uniform at first. But then they grew to love it. Private Main's heading off. Yeah, thank you for coming on here. Hopefully we see you again. And
come by. Don't be a stranger.
Keep doing the history thing. That's awesome.
Don't be a stranger.
Yeah, have a good weekend too, Private Main. But yeah, the whole Iron Brigade, and I think Eric Scheinlein, he touches on this in Black Iron Mercy, but when they got those uniforms and how much they did not like them, and all that. Oh, Frank said he took a tintype of himself at a Victorian photography studio in Gettysburg wearing an Iron Brigade officer's uniform. That's cool.
Yeah, that's one. I think that's one right across the street from Dobbin House, right?
Yes, that's where what's his face, Michael sells his t-shirts. You know, he does
Yeah.
some really cool Civil War t-shirts. He sells them there. We went
You know,
to
Dobbin House. I don't know, Mary. Dobbin House has gone downhill for me. I mean,
really? You guys
well,
went there, right? What happened?
no. But the problem is we used to go down there and go to the basement at the Dobbin House,
Mhm.
the pub there, and sit at the bar, have a couple of drinks, and leave.
Yep.
Now they won't let you sit at the bar unless you order food. So if you want to sit at the bar,
Really?
they make it, which is a change for them, which is unfortunate because it was a great place to go just for a quick beer and sit
Yeah,
downstairs and see the
that's
period
really
clothes and the candles.
strange. Wonder
And now
why.
that was a change that I noticed when I was there a few weeks ago, which is kind of
Interesting.
unfortunate, but
Hmm.
yeah, whatever. It is what it is. Good food though. If you go, has that
Oh, yeah.
fantastic that gingerbread.
Oh, that thing I supposedly stole from you.
You, yeah, yeah, you
Double
did.
dessert day.
Fattened
Yeah.
up that day.
Hmm. I did not.
Got 2 desserts and she ate both of them. I didn't even get one.
I did not. You accused me of growling at you. Oh, Autumn says she agrees with you about Dobbin. Oh, Bjorn's on here from
Hey, Bjorn.
he is one of our sponsors for the podcast.
Hey Bjorn, just so you
never-
know, I got your box the other day. Thanks for sending it. So we're going to be doing that event on the 22nd at the National Civil Museum,
Yes.
doing trivia. And so Bjorn in the Lincoln Bookshop, he sent us a bunch of good books and a bunch of other stuff.
Awesome.
So if you come and you win trivia, you're going to get one of his books again.
Yeah,
But
and if you've ever done
he's-
our trivia on our roundtables, that is where the books come from. He said Iron Brigade, he's got books about that. Of course he does. That's awesome.
Iron Brigade is pretty cool. And, you know, obviously people talk a lot about Rufus Dawes and people like that, as they should. But the 24th Michigan, 19th Indiana, 2nd and 3rd Wisconsin. There's a lot more than besides the 6th Wisconsin.
Yeah, well, Cal Schoonover has that really good book about Wisconsin at Antietam, right? And it's like, it's Iron Brigade, obviously, but I think there's some other stuff in it too. But it's really good. And yeah, Eric Scheinlein's Black Iron Mercy, amazing
That's
historical fiction. That I told Eric this when we had him on for the book club, and I said, you made me so angry with that one part. I'm not going to give it away in case people haven't read it, but there's that one part where that
I know the part.
and it's like, no.
Yeah, and the way he does is very, very good
Oh
too.
God, it was just I
good-
had to read that part twice, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, it's a tough part. It's a tough one, you know.
But yeah, there's some great another great
Although Schoono, you know, speaking of Schoono, he's a Notre Dame fan, so that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, Lynn says she's going to pick that book up. Crucible covers post-war, but lightly, and issues with his daddy issues.
No, I mean it's he does though. He does, and
yeah,
and you can see it, especially in his early. What was cool about Cheat Mountain too is I try to bring this back on subject matter, which I always
we
try
never
to do.
stay on subject with this.
But when Robert E. Lee left for the mountains, he was clean shaven. When he came back, he had that white beard that everyone knows him for.
Yeah.
He grew that because of Cheat Mountain, because he's and he comes back to Richmond on Halloween of 1861. He's got this big white beard now. They started calling him, you know, old Granny Lee.
Yeah.
But he grew the beard at this Cheat Mountain. That's where he got the beard. So, and he writes to his wife and tells her, just so you know, I got a beard now, you know, and so on. And then he kept it for the rest, as far as I know, the rest of his life. He had the rest of the war.
Liked it then.
Yeah,
but yeah,
he looks good. He looks good in the beard. I think he looked better. Most guys do, admittedly. You know, whatever.
I've never seen Howard without a beard. That's the thing. There's no pictures that exist of Howard without a beard.
Oh, I wish there was one when you see him and you go, that'd be so funny.
I mean, I don't really have an opinion on how he looks.
You could probably still see his chiseled face and his rock hard abs though.
Oh, I mean, there's pictures of Charles, his brother, without a beard, and they looked a lot alike. So I would imagine that's probably how he looked. But yeah, Iron Brigade. I'm trying to, like, there's that one book which is like Eric said it was like his Bible, and the guy is like very old now that wrote it. But I have it. It's a really good book. But the Iron Brigade was kind of like, you know, I remember they were one of the things that I was very fascinated about when I started studying Gettysburg. But then I went to Antietam and was like in the cornfield, and then South Mountain, because that was where they got their name. And there's so much more than just Gettysburg and Antietam. There's like South Mountain.
No, but the thing about it though is the Iron Brigade. You know, first brigade or the first division or the first corps. They
Yeah.
have all the sexiness about them too.
Oh yeah.
But there are a lot. I mean, you look at some of these other brigades. You look at Caldwell's brigade. This is speaking just of Gettysburg now. And you go down to the regiments. You talk about the 16th Maine, about the 137th New York, the 1st Minnesota. You're talking about the 95th New York. There's a whole bunch that don't fall into that thing. But it is true though, if you read a lot of the Company H and those things, Sam Watkins, that when they saw those black hats, they knew they were in for it.
Yeah. The black hats were like, you were like, oh shit. It kind of became the black hats, the equivalent in the Confederacy, I think, was Cleburne's flag or Hardee's flag too, which is in the picture that I have in the background. So that is the flag. It's called the flag of Hardee's division, but it's also called the flag of Cleburne's division as well. They alternate names. You can actually see it hung up at Ringgold Gap.
Yeah, we saw
which
that.
was
That
really
was pretty
cool. That was the first time I'd ever seen it flying anywhere. I'd never seen it. I've only ever seen it in paintings. And in that one sketch that Union officer did after Ringgold Gap. Oh, Lynn said, what was the historical fiction book you mentioned? Black Iron Mercy by Eric Scheinlein. And it is so good.
Now, what's good about Eric, for one thing, Eric's a friend of ours. He's a fireman from Milwaukee,
He's so
Wisconsin.
cool. And he's got like 3 cats as well.
No, he's a good dude. But he
so
wrote
fun.
he wrote a couple of books. One called The Dim White Light, which is good, but admittedly is not as good as the other one. Black Iron Mercy is a story about a soldier from the 6th Wisconsin, and it takes him through his life, and it talks about Antietam, talks about Gettysburg, but it's very, very vivid, and it's very historically accurate. But it's a novel,
and it will make you. There's one part, if you read it, Lynn, it will make you angry, and it
would make a great movie, by the way.
Oh my god!
And like I told Eric, I will absolutely volunteer to be in it. There's a writer's strike going on there. This might be my chance.
You and him should start writing the script for it.
Darren Weeks, Zooey Deschanel, starring in Black Iron Mercy.
What about
I can see it now.
me?
We don't understudy or something. But that'd be cool. But it's a great book, though. You're gonna enjoy, if you get that book, you will enjoy it as with anybody. It's what I remember reading that years ago, and I was just dumbfounded. It was actually the first Amazon review I ever wrote. Ever was that?
It is such a good book, and our friend Mark, who lives in Gettysburg, he gave it to one of the English teachers at the school that he works at. And apparently she was going to try and make it as part of the curriculum.
It's that good. It's that good.
It is just like I said, there's one part that you'll know if you read it, Lynn, you'll know the part that when I say it will make you angry, you'll get angry.
Yeah, it's good,
like,
but it's very historically tight though, because you just read it. You'll maybe we'll.
He writes like he was there. And we asked him about that. Like, how? You asked
if he was there?
No, but like that's what we said. Like, how do you do that? You write like you were like part of this and know your stuff. Frank Mir could be a background character just as Howard.
Yeah, like in the Gettysburg movie, you can back there.
He was in it for 3 minutes.
That's all right. Hey,
he was not in it long enough to get credited.
Well, he probably didn't have a line, so
he was also not part of the Actors Guild either.
Who, Howard?
He was a reenactor. The guy that played him was a Howard. There's no Howard reenactors, by the way.
What are you talking about? The Boston Marathon's here every April here. There's 10,000 Howard reenactors. What are you talking about?
God. But yeah, Black Iron Mercy, I enjoyed it more than the Killer Angels.
Yeah, Killer Angels is pretty good. Michael Shara's it's really, really solid. It's similar in a way, but Black Iron Mercy is good. It's more personal. It doesn't focus on 20 different characters and simultaneous.
I cried so much at the end of that book. I just was like, holy gee, this book just, I was like, I remember like we have like a group chat with Eric and I messaged him. I'm like, dude, what the hell? This book is like crazy.
Oh yeah, I remember when I read that. I know the scene you're talking about. It was like the Chris Farley Folgers coffee scene in SNL. You son of a bitch.
Yeah,
because he a black-hearted, miserable prick like me. Even I was like, whoa, that was.
Well, yeah, we both told him it made us angry, and then someone on the book club said that made me angry. It was so. But yeah, I think as far as like, so Black Iron Mercy is up there for, and we talked about this on here a few times. I know we got to jump off in like 10, 15 minutes because we got to get to Worcester. Oh, Bjorn mentions a great Iron Brigade memoir that is not Dawes is As If It Were Glory, Robert Beecham's Civil War from the Iron Brigade to Black Regiment. Wow, that's cool. I've never heard of that one before.
No, that's I've heard that one, but I haven't read that one. So I'll
That'd be
definitely
a good one
to check that one out.
Yeah.
But there's a
Thank you,
lot of it.
Bjorn.
But there's, you know, these tough Westerners, you know, and we were talking before about like if Claiborne had stayed in the West, that's why I'm not sure he would have, because he could have ended up in a regiment like that, where he could have come out, he could have ended up in one of these. I know he would have been likely from Ohio, although he could have been like with the 55th, the 73rd, or the 8th Ohio, or one of them.
Yeah, the only reason I say Claiborne would have been Western theater is because he lived in Cincinnati, which is where Lytle lived.
I mean, you're probably right.
And he might have joined with Lytle. That's the thing, is they might have been in the same regiment, company, brigade, whatever. But I do think Claiborne may have been like, and I often think about how leadership would have went. What does that mean if Claiborne is fighting in the Western Theater for the Union? What does that mean for somebody like Thomas? What does that mean for somebody like McPherson? Because Claiborne, I mean, McPherson's good, but he's not Claiborne good. What does that mean for, like, he would have been at Shiloh? What does that mean?
I mean,
what does that mean for that? You know,
I mean, he might have got killed on day one. You never know.
He could have, absolutely. But I'm thinking about this, if he hadn't been, like, how does that change this leadership structure in the Western Theater for the Union armies? I do think he probably would have been like, you know, I don't know, would he have been asked to like step up when Sherman was out on his little thing?
He would have been a division commander realistically.
Oh yeah.
He would have, I don't know if he would have made corps, but he would have made division. Because you look at there was some pretty good Union generals who fought who never really made corps, guys like Carl Schurz, who they rose up to division, brigade stuff. But it's tough.
I think he probably would have been. I think he might have been corps command.
Yeah, you never know. He might have
at some point, because you think about it, like, you know, how Thomas was treated. Like, does the Irish thing kind of go? Does that make him worse than someone like Thomas as a Virginian? Because Thomas was treated badly. That's the thing.
I think it would have.
There's all these different factors into it, but then you think about somebody like, you know, how far did Maher make it? Mahar, or whatever his name was.
No, I mean, it's just tough to say. They would have. They definitely had a glass ceiling. A lot of them did. A lot of them did. But we've said before that the non-West Pointers are the ones who probably were the best ones at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, they were. I agree with that.
The ones who finished towards the bottom of West Point. I mean, you look at some of these guys. I mean, you look at, you know, class of 1861. Who graduated first? It was Patty O'Rourke. Who graduated last? George Custer. So you have the yin and the yang at Gettysburg in different parts of the battlefield. Yeah. And you got guys like Pickett at the bottom of the barrel as well, kind of like University of Toronto, barely made it, just under the bar, right? But I mean, it really depends what you came out of that. I mean, some of these guys who kind of had that Dennis Mahan, you know, Jomini, Clausewitz in their head, and that education kind of slowed them down versus the guys who just felt it and then knew what they were doing.
Yeah, they were able to, some of them were, I think Grant was able to break away from that. Someone like Beauregard will never know if he would have been able to, because he's like that bullpen pitcher that never gets put in, even though he's one of the good ones. We'll never know if he was able to break away from that, because he was very much of that, like, if it's not in a textbook, I can't do it kind of thing. But I think too, like, Claiborne had the experience of being in the British Army. I don't know how much that factored into how he was in the Civil War. I think whatever it was, that, you know, the it being what Hancock had, I think Claiborne had it as well. So did John Brown Gordon, that they were able to adapt and recognize, okay, this happened and it was a mistake, but now I need to do this to make it better. But then again, Claiborne wouldn't have read Clausewitz or Jomini. So he's going into that with like, well,
he might have, though. He still might have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. I mean, a lot of these books weren't even published in English till later, so it's tough to say what he would have done. But I mean, he certainly would have been around people who did, you know, because he was always an underling to somebody. He was always somebody's. You know, he served under Hardy, who literally wrote the friggin' book.
Yeah, and Claiborne was okay with that. I don't know if he really need to read Simmons' book again before we have him on our book club. I don't know if Claiborne really was one to advocate for himself or if he was just like, I'm here, tell me what to do kind of thing.
Yeah, it's
But
just tough to say.
I think Claiborne's other strength though was he had some of the best subordinates in the Army of Tennessee. In the
Oh, he
Army
absolutely
of
did.
Tennessee. Hiram Granberry, not Lucius Polk, or
Yeah, it was Lucius Polk. He
Polk.
had Daniel Govan. He
Yeah.
had Polk. He had Granberry.
And
He
they
had
they all were able to, I think they had a great relationship with each other.
and that's the key to the whole
Yeah.
thing. So we're going to mention Cheat Mountain again, okay, is there wasn't that. And that's kind of why Lee had to go out there. And Lee was no picnic at that point either. You're dealing with some of these Confederates who
Yeah.
they consistently had to deal with over and over and over again. William Loring, he was pissy. You had Henry Jackson, who was a Yale graduate, who was a poet. That was his job. Samuel R. Anderson, he had his Tennessee, the first, 4th, and 16th Tennessee.
Yeah.
And this was a hodgepodge of guys. They were all brand new. They all just didn't like each other. They were all sick. They were all miserable, and they were all fighting with each other. And so you didn't have that. And so you had a lot of situations where you needed somebody to be a calming force. And Lee ultimately did prove to be that. And he ended up eventually taking over, and then the whole thing fell apart anyway. But he did add some stability to it. And he even got Loring to come on board with him.
Yeah.
Which you have to think Loring would have been like, go ahead.
Loring was probably at that point, he was like, my guys had measles, but okay. One quick thing I want to mention before we jump off is I just, Frank being in Chicago, if it's open, Frank, Abraham Lincoln Bookshop.
Yes.
Gotta go. You will love it there.
No, I'm telling you, Frank, if you have a chance to go see Bjorn, I mean, just if it's open today, but if it's open this weekend, I hope it is. Who knows? But put it in Waze, put Abraham Lincoln Bookshop, and you're gonna find Uber's gonna drop you off. You're not gonna think you're in the right place.
Know where you are.
You're gonna knock on the door, and then Bjorn's gonna let you in. You're gonna realize what it is, and it's a treasure trove. If he's around, he'll show you around. So definitely check that out. And if you do, you will absolutely get your picture taken in front of the big Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
Which is mandatory.
Yeah, it's a cool place. Bjorn's a great guy. Bjorn used to be park ranger at Shiloh. That's his jam.
He knows his shit.
I know the stuff about Shiloh.
We talked a lot of Shiloh the other day at the round table, Mary. We talked a lot of Shiloh.
Yeah.
Talked a lot of Shiloh, a lot of Frank, a lot of Western theater, a little bit of country, a little bit of rock and roll. The other night was all Western theater.
Yeah. Oh, and Bjorn mentioned Blizzards Loring. James W. Rabb short bio is the only one. He'll write. He was called Blizzards.
Yeah.
He was the kid that ran away to the Alamo at the age of 17.
He did. Found out there was. He found out there was
like, nope.
He found out there was no basement in the Alamo, and he came back. And he had some. He fought in the Civil War. But yeah, he was a guy who found out he was going to go fight for Texas. He was 14 years old, and
his dad's like, no, you're not.
Yeah, you're not going to Texas. You're not going down there. But that's how it is.
They're open today and every Saturday from 10 till 4. And they do also follow them on Facebook. They do some great Facebook. They do great Facebook lives with authors. They recently had Julian Scheer on, who is a Canadian author. And he wrote a book about I think it's
Julian Weir, the artillerist from Gettysburg.
Julian Scheer, who wrote a book about
of the 5th U.S. Artillery.
Yeah. Yep. Anyway,
that's quite a feat if you had Julian.
Julian Scheer wrote a book about.
Speaking of that, he got his ass bailed up by the 19th Maine. By the way, there you go. New Englanders come to the rescue as usual.
Oh, Frank said he's going to try and make it, but he's got a bit of jet lag.
Oh, for God's sake, jet lag! You can sleep in the Uber.
Frank's a trooper. I mean, he was on that walk with us in Pickett's Charge.
Okay, so hold on a second, Frank. You dress up like you're going to the Yukon Valley in Gettysburg on July 3rd, and you came a little jet lag. Come on, man. No, I get it. But that's if you do get a chance, you should definitely do it because it's a really cool place to go. And in the stuff that you'll see, it's not. We're not talking about a friggin' Borders books here. We're talking about a museum that has.
It is like when you and I was on virtually. You've been in person. I was on virtually, and Bjorn showed me that because I am thinking about getting Mead's signature tattooed on my arm, and he had that signature of Mead. I'm like, oh my God, that was so cool. And you can find, and I got a book from there. So thank you, Bjorn. Humphrey's account of part of the Civil War. It's got amazing maps in it. It's from the late 1800s. I'm so glad to have that. And eventually, yes, I am going to seek you out for the Howard memoirs because I would love if there's ever like an edition from the 1800s that came out or 1900s because Howard wrote it in the 1900s. I'd love to have that someday.
Well, why don't we jump off because we got shenanigans afoot here. So so thanks for jumping on with us. So next episode is going to be on
it's going to be
Minty
on
and Wilder,
Minty and Wilder,
right?
For the 160th anniversary of Chickamauga. So yeah, we're going to be focusing in on them. Now we have done a couple episodes about Chickamauga. We did them 3 years ago now. And we do talk about Minty and Wilder, but this is going to be zeroing in on who both of them were, their actions on September 18th, 1863, and I mean, I do agree with Wittenberg on this. Wittenberg wrote a great book called Holding the Line in the River of Death, that Minty and Wilder, what they do does ultimately save the Army of the Cumberland from destruction by Braxton Bragg, because what they do forces Bragg to be like, well, I can't do that battle plan I originally wanted to because these a-holes kicked my ass.
Yeah.
And they get their asses, the other one that gets their ass kicked is Forrest.
Yeah, he has a tough
it's vibe by Minty's guys. Like Minty just is like, nope, goodbye.
It is. So hopefully it's good. Frank, hopefully you get to the bookstore.
Yeah, he said we're really selling him on the idea. So yeah, Frank, it is. You will love it.
Just bookshop is there. If it's there, I must go. Definitely check it out. Say hi to Bjorn for her. She's a good dude. So, all right, we're going to jump off. We got stuff to do. Have a great, long, safe weekend. Hopefully the weather is cool where you're at. Hopefully it's dry. Be careful. Be safe. Be nice to each other. Don't be mean. Hopefully everything works out well for you guys. Hopefully your college football team wins, unless you're Notre Dame or Ohio State, and hopefully everything works out well. So, Mary, again, pleasure all yours. Listen to the Cheat Mountain episode. That's a good one. It tells a good story of the beginning part of Robert E. Lee's order, where his first field command, he falls on his face, and not by his own. It's not even his fault, but you can sort of see how the psychology of Robert E. Lee evolves and how he learns from that. Because you'll notice the mistakes he makes are the ones he does the opposite with in the later battles, like Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Second Manassas.
The small battles are always good to study for that reason, because you see what these generals went early in the Civil War, especially what they're doing, how they're learning, how they're taking that with them. Kind of like, just quick example before we jump off, Claiborne at Shiloh. He recognizes that had he had sharpshooters at Shiloh, he would have been able to take out the Union artillery that was totally bombarding his guys. And he went away from that. And in his off time, he was like to his men, you're going to train to be sharpshooters, and you're going to take out the horses and the guys in the Union artillery, because that's what matters, kind of thing.
Well, everyone have a happy Labor Day. Merry happy Labor with a U day to you.
I've stopped calling it that way.
It's definitely good. All right,
you're
guys.
You're welcome, Barbara. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for everybody. Yeah, see you, Bjorn. Have a great Labor Day. Right, Jim's on here. This is the truth, Jim. We are about to hit the road as well.
He's on the road. Hopefully it means he's driving on the road. He's not standing on the road somewhere.
I think he's saying hit the road. Lisa might think hit the road.
Oh, hit it. See you soon. Okay, I guess we'll figure that out. Maybe he's had a few truths already. I guess we'll find out soon, shortly.
He's like giggling, and Lisa's like, no.
Don't encourage them, Jim. Hopefully he brought his balls t-shirt.
I was just thinking that. He's wearing the balls t-shirt.
So bad. All right, we gotta jump on. We gotta go. All right, guys, we'll talk to y'all soon. Have a good weekend.
Bye, guys. See you later.
Bye.